My name is Amelia Carter and I am 33 years old. 12 years ago, my family forced me out of the house in the middle of a rainy night with exactly one suitcase and my father's last words: "You will always be a failure." They erased my name from every conversation, every family photo. My mother said I was a stain. My sister, Sophia, was always their pride, a future physician, the child they never stopped boasting about. And today I walked into that very sister's lavish wedding, accompanied by my husband, a renowned cardiac surgeon, and our little daughter holding my hand tight. While all eyes were still scrutinizing and whispering, the MC unexpectedly announced, "Tonight's ceremony is sponsored by Alaris Health Tech, the healthcare corporation that has signed with the National Hospital Network. Their CEO is also present here, Amelia Carter." The whole room seemed to hold its breath. A second of silence, then a ripple of murmurs. Someone dropped a wine glass. Someone looked at me as if seeing a ghost from the past returned. So I, the child who had been driven out, am the one behind the dream wedding of the family's golden child. Do you think I came here to exact revenge? Or to reclaim justice for myself? If you have ever been cast out by family, ever been dismissed and erased from their lives, share your feelings in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow this journey. Because what happened next, no one in that room could have predicted. I still remember that night clearly. There were no warm candles, no gentle goodbyes. Only rain drumming on the porch roof, wet shoes, and an old suitcase sitting small on the front step. My mother stood in the doorway, her eyes cold as if I were a stranger at the wrong address. My father would not look at me. He just stood there with his arms crossed, his face flushed. Whether from anger or shame I could not tell. "What are you still standing there for?" he snarled. "If you dare steal from the very clinic I built, you don't deserve to set foot in this house anymore. You made your choice, Amelia." I opened my mouth to explain, but he continued without giving me a chance. "If you step out this door, you are no longer my child." Wind swept down the hall, bringing a biting cold. My sister Sophia stood half hidden behind the staircase, face peeking through the rail. No one stopped me, no one offered pity. The once devoted little sister now stood there silent, like a witness bought by her silence. I walked out. Not because I accepted the crime they accused me of, but because I knew if I stayed I could not live honestly for another second. The suitcase bumped my shin and made a mute sound. The door closed behind me. No one called my name. No one held my hand. Everything began with a number. A scholarship worth $120,000 that I had earned after 3 years of obsessively studying at community college. That money would have covered biomedical engineering, the field I had dreamed of my whole childhood. But when the scholarship letter arrived at home, my mother was the first to pick it up. She offered no congratulations, only looked up at my father. They exchanged a very quick look. No words were spoken, but I sensed something shifting. The next week, Sophia was accepted to Stanford, with costs almost matching my scholarship. My mother said it was an opportunity not to be missed. My father said, "Sophia has a clearer future." Me. I was told to work another year to cultivate humility. I refused. I demanded they return my scholarship. I said I would find my own way. They must not touch that fund. It was my effort. That was the night I first saw the change in Sophia's eyes. No longer the sister who used to shadow me every summer. She had learned the power of being chosen. The theft from the clinic happened a few days later. A small amount, just a few $100s, vanished from the petty cash. I happened to be the last one who reconciled the accounts that day. No one questioned me. My mother told me, "Finish the job and don't cause trouble." My father stayed silent until the ledgers accidentally landed in his hands. That same evening I was called into the living room. There was no conversation. No evidence. Just an indictment written in prejudice. "We tried to teach you to live with ethics, but it seems there is no other way," they said. I stood there, my hands clenched until they bled, trying not to tremble. Everything inside me shattered, but I did not cry. I only felt empty. "Pack your things and get the hell out of my house," my father barked. I climbed the stairs, packed 3 outfits, a few books, and a tattered notebook of half-finished research projects. When I came back down, my sister was sitting on the sofa, filing her nails, not looking at me. My mother leaned against the kitchen doorframe, phone in hand as if ready to call the police if I hesitated too long. That night I slept on a park bench. The drizzle turned into full rain. I used the suitcase to shield myself from the wind and hugged my lone sweater as a pillow. But it wasn't the cold that hurt most, it was the question, how can a family turn its back on its own blood so quickly? It took me nearly 3 weeks to find my first job, cleaning and sterilizing equipment at a community health clinic. The pay was small, the hours long, but at least I was near health care. I enrolled part-time at a local college and spent every evening reading in the library. Slowly, I taught myself basic programming and began to understand how patient monitoring systems functioned. When I met Ethan, he didn't ask about my past. He only looked at the patient flow diagram I had sketched on a napkin and said, "Do you realize this could become software that saves real lives?" I smiled, a small thing after months of darkness. I hope so. We began typing out code in a tiny rented room. Nights filled with instant noodle boxes, flowcharts, and the clack of keyboards mixed with the rhythm of my half-sleep breath. 12 years later, I stood in that opulent wedding hall beside my husband, the first man who saw my intellect as an asset rather than a threat, and our little daughter. I did not return to seek revenge. I came to be present, to remind that even when crushed, a person can survive, grow, and redefine what family means. And when the MC announced me as the main sponsor, I felt no triumph. I simply scanned the room toward my parents, stunned, and toward Sophia, the sister who had taken everything from me. She stood there in her white wedding dress, clutching her champagne flute. Our eyes met. No words were spoken, yet I knew she remembered that rainy night. And she knew I was still here, stronger than ever. I once thought I would collapse. Not from hunger or poverty, but from waking up in a damp boarding room and having to remember where I was, which school I attended, and how many shifts I needed to work to pay next week's tuition. I attended community college in the mornings, worked as a barista from midday to late afternoon, then rushed to the nearby health center to mop floors, collect waste, and sterilize treatment rooms. When shifts were short, I took the night call at the patient care hotline. I slept fewer than 4 hours a day. Sometimes I nodded off over textbooks, pencil in hand, one hand pressed flat on the page. But I did not complain. I had no one to complain to, no friends, no family, only myself and a single objective: survive. I began to notice small failures in the hospital. The monitors that beeped inconsistently, nurses writing data by hand then re-entering it, doctors having to call 3 times because coordination was poor. Each of those inefficiencies stole precious time, sometimes lives. I had no prestigious degree, but I had the eye of someone who had lived through chaos. I saw bottlenecks and where to fix them. One late evening, while manning the reception desk, I drew a patient data flow diagram in black ink on a napkin, not expecting anyone to notice. Ethan Miller arrived like a curious question. He wore a white coat and a badge identifying him as a resident physician, looking tired but still politely composed. He paused when he saw my sketch. "What are you doing?" he asked. I looked up and hid the paper behind a notebook. "Nothing, just doodling." He frowned. "That's a patient flow diagram, isn't it? Based on Kellerman?" I blinked and slowly pulled the paper back. "Kellerman is too theoretical. The problem isn't intake, it's data delays during transfers. Paper takes 2 minutes, re-entry takes 4, and in that time a patient's critical sign can be missed." Ethan looked at me as if he had found gold in the dirt. I thought about that, but I've never seen anyone map it so clearly. I didn't know how to react. No one had looked at me with that kind of respect since I left home. He sat with me for nearly an hour that night. We discussed the existing system, what should change, what was unrealistic in US hospitals, and what was simply a lack of imagination. When the shift ended, Ethan said, "You should turn this into something. A real tool." I laughed, not bitterly, just because it sounded improbable. With an old computer, instant noodles, and a room without enough chairs? "With this mind," he said, touching the napkin, "and me." The apartment we rented for work was only 37 square meters, about 400 square feet. A folding table doubled as a meeting table, 2 folding chairs, and a second-hand laptop Ethan bought from an electronics flea market. I learned to code from free websites, spending a month getting the first line to run without error. Ethan used his off shifts to study healthcare data structures. We wrote a simple initial program, a real-time vital signs tracker that could automatically alert when a metric crossed a threshold. The first month the software crashed constantly. Some nights we didn't sleep because of a missing semicolon. There were times I cried when the program refused to run correctly. Ethan never lost his temper. He brewed tea, sat beside me and said softly, "Look how far we've come." Whenever I wanted to quit, he reminded me, "You endured rain, being cast out, and 3 jobs a day. A piece of code cannot beat you." I don't love Ethan because he is a doctor. I love him because he does not view me through the lens of my past. He sees me as me. No parental endorsements required, no degree to validate worth. We named the project Alaris, a neutral name suggesting recovery. The first year we had no investors. No hospital wanted to bet on uncertified software. But then a nursing home on the outskirts of New Jersey allowed us a 3-week trial. The results exceeded expectations. Average nurse response times dropped by 42%, and post-surgical complication rates fell by 18%. From there, doors opened. One small hospital recommended us to a larger one. A medical conference invited me to present. Bank balances that had been a few $100s became 7 figures after 5 years. There was no time for celebration. I could not stop. Every gain reminded me of my wet footsteps the night I left. The step out from the roof of the home that had once claimed me. Each morning, waking beside Ethan and seeing our little girl smiling in her father's arms, I thought maybe being cast out had led me to what was worth keeping. And so now, standing in Sophia's wedding hearing praises for the company I created, I felt no arrogance. I only felt survival. Not by revenge but by rising. Quietly, without boasting, simply being steady and undeniable. That was the one thing they had not anticipated. We never had a perfect start. But each sleepless night in that cramped apartment, every program crash, every rejected contract fed the foundation stronger than anything from my past. I never imagined I would become the CEO of a health tech corporation. No one handed me the opportunity, no chair waited. We built it, through blood, tears, and a stubborn resolve unseen by others. Ours Health Tech began with 2 people, an overworked laptop, and a whiteboard full of notes. We developed our first software as if swimming upstream, fighting the system, prejudice, and our own fears. When the first hospital accepted a trial, I signed a waiver taking full responsibility if the software failed. My hand trembled as I signed. Ethan simply said, "If you don't believe in what you made, who will?" 3 weeks later, they asked for a long-term contract. Then a second hospital, a third, nursing centers, clinic chains, and nonprofit health organizations. We did not take big funding early on. Instead, we reinvested profits, used hospital feedback to refine the product, and invested our own time to prove efficacy. 7 years after we wrote our first line of code, Alaris became the principal partner of 3 major hospital systems on the East Coast. I walked into the boardroom in a tailored suit, carrying no glittering diplomas or family reputation, only data and concrete results. I looked at the chief medical officers and seasoned investors and saw in their eyes a look I had never received from my parents during my youth: recognition. That was the moment I realized I did not need anyone's permission to succeed. I did not contact my family for many years. No calls, no messages. They did not look for me either. I used to wonder, if one day my mother fell ill, would she call me? Or would she continue to pretend I had never existed? I did not have an answer. And I did not seek one. The name Amelia Carter gradually began to appear at medical conferences, in specialist journals, and at healthcare innovation events. I kept using my mother's last name. Not out of affection, but because I wanted that name to stop representing weakness or submission. Ethan was always the one standing behind me, never seeking the spotlight. He would say, "You fought alone for too long. Now I will be the windbreak behind you." We had a child after 5 years together. Her name is Mia, taken from the first letters of my name and Ethan's. She is the only thing that calms me, that pushes the nightmares of my youth into the background. I never tell her about the past. To her, I am simply Mom, the one who can fix toys and make cat-shaped pancakes. We moved our headquarters to Boston after signing a contract with Davis Memorial Hospital System, a 9-figure deal spanning 10 years. I remember the day we cut the ribbon on the new headquarters. The mayor of the city was there, representatives from the health department, and a local press contingent. I stood and spoke to the crowd, bright lights beaming straight into my face. I looked down at the front row and saw Ethan holding Mia quietly, a warm smile on his face. I had planned to invite my parents. Not because I needed them to see my success, but because I had partly forgiven, for myself, not for them. But then I stopped. I was not ready to have them present in a part of my life they once disowned. Perhaps I still had a vague fear. If they came and looked at me with the same old eyes, would I waver? I chose to keep my distance. I chose peace of mind. I never hid my work. But I also did not try to put my name in a newspaper where someone from my past might stumble across it and show up. That silence, between me and my family, lasted more than 10 years. Until the day I received Sophia's wedding invitation. The card did not have my name. It invited Ethan Miller, the renowned physician formerly of Memorial East, and one guest. Ethan held the invitation and looked at me. I just shrugged. Maybe they think I don't exist anymore. He asked, "Are we going?" I was silent for a long moment, looking out the window. Mia was riding her bike in the yard, her hair fluttering in the sun. I saw myself in that look. A smaller version, unhurt, not yet rejected. "Yes," I said calmly. "We will go." Ethan didn't ask why. He simply nodded. And so 12 years after that rainy night I returned, not to seek forgiveness nor to take revenge. I came back like a cool breeze on a hot afternoon. But impossible to ignore. No one in that wedding hall knew that the woman in the jade silk dress walking in with Dr. Ethan was the daughter they had once disowned. Until the MC spoke. Tonight's ceremony would like to thank our primary sponsor, Alaris Health Tech, which has provided the latest post-operative care system for the entire Vermont Regional Hospital network. We are honored to have Alaris CEO in attendance. Amelia Carter. The wine glass in my mother's hand tipped, spilling a dark red stain across her dress. Sophia stood frozen. I smiled slightly, offering no explanation. Let them guess. Because sometimes an unanswered question is the heaviest verdict. I wasn't sure whether it was truly an oversight, or a subtle message that I wasn't welcome. The invitation was printed on ivory paper, calligraphy looping elegantly, sealed with a deep red wax stamp bearing an iris motif and gold-embossed lettering. Invited, Dr. Ethan Miller and one guest. My name was not on it. There was no Amelia Carter, even though that name had appeared many times in medical journals, among lists of influential young founders, and recently as a nominee for a National Medical Innovation Award. I froze for a moment when I looked at the card. Not angry, just a hollow feeling, as if pulled back into an old, dust-covered memory. Ethan couldn't hide his discomfort. "Did she sign this?" he asked, holding the invitation and flipping it over, brow furrowed. "Richard and Helen both sent it." Sophia left the seating line blank. I folded the card, set it beside a half-full glass of water. "It's fine. I didn't come for applause." Ethan looked up, his expression softening. "We'll go. Not to prove anything to them. But to make clear that your family is here. Your family is him and Mia." I nodded. "And if someone asks?" "I'll say she's Amelia Carter. She's my daughter's mother. She founded the company listed on your sponsorship materials." He smiled, his gaze still cool. "We don't need anyone's permission to show up." Sophia's wedding took place at an upscale resort on the shores of Lake Champlain, Vermont. The grounds were filled with white roses and phalaenopsis orchids, decorated in a French classical style, crystal chandeliers suspended above pristine white tents. Everything was perfect to the point of suffocation. I chose a floor-length jade silk dress, simple, elegant. My hair was pinned loosely at the nape with a silver olive branch hairpin. Ethan wore a classic black tuxedo, holding Mia in his arms. She wore a white lace dress, Mary Jane shoes, and her soft curls tied with a green ribbon. As we stepped into the main ballroom, conversations stuttered. No one spoke loudly, but the unusual silence rolled through the room like a slow wave. I walked as if entering a professional conference, where everyone awaits an introduction. There was no one to introduce us. No friendly faces. Only quick glances, raised brows, and the familiar haughty looks I had learned to read since childhood. I saw my parents at the bar. Richard glanced at us and turned away as if the sun were too bright. Helen stood motionless, her champagne tilted, watching me like a ghost. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Ready?" I smiled without answering. Mia whispered in a small voice, "Mom, there's a lady wearing a dress like my doll." I smoothed my daughter's hair. That's Aunt Sophia. At that moment, the MC's voice came through the microphone. Please join me in applauding the primary sponsor of tonight's ceremony, Alaris Health Tech, and their CEO who is present here, Amelia Carter. Applause rippled reflexively, but the atmosphere felt frozen. A few claps stopped midway. Some guests turned to look around, clearly puzzled. That name, no one expected to hear it here. I moved gently toward the center of the room, saying nothing, merely lowering my head slightly, as if to acknowledge, yes, that is me. No more, no less. Then I saw Sophia. She was emerging from the back room, linked arm in arm with the groom, a tall, polite-looking man who appeared tense. When her gaze met mine, the hand waving to guests hung in midair. Her lips moved as if to form words, but nothing came out. I did not turn away. I did not avoid her. I stood there as a living reminder that some people, no matter how far pushed away, find a way to return, dignified, steady, without parade. Amelia, a woman's voice called from the right. I turned. It was Dr. Halland from Grace Memorial Hospital, where Alaris had just deployed its inpatient record management package. Didn't expect to see you here, she said with genuine warmth. We just rolled out the first phase of your post-op alert system, and it's exceeded our expectations. I nodded politely. It's good to see you, doctor. A cluster of people gathered. A researcher from New York General, a chief technology officer from a private Boston hospital. Handshakes, greetings, and technical questions crowded around me. Within minutes, I was no longer the disowned daughter. I was the head of a health platform deployed across 13 states. My voice was a voice people listened to. I saw Sophia watching from a distance. She stood beside our mother, not approaching but unable to look away. My mother leaned in, whispering something, but both their gazes lacked their former arrogance. I did not need their validation. My presence, husband at my side, child in hand, my name announced at the sponsorship, was the complete answer. A salt and pepper-haired man approached. Excuse me, are you Amelia Carter? I heard your Boston Medical talk last year. Your presentation on critical care data analysis forced me to rewrite our internal protocols. I shook his hand, smiling. Glad to hear it was helpful. The crowd's attention shifted. Not because I was an uninvited guest, but because I stood among them as part of their world. And all those looks directed at me now were not surprise but curiosity, edged with a little caution. I stood straight, looked toward Sophia, and offered a small, wordless nod. No contesting. Just occupying the place I had deserved for a long time. I left the conversation cluster and walked slowly past the semicircular rows of floral seating around the main stage. The violin music played softly in the garden corner, but my ears tuned it out, leaving only the steady cadence of my steps and fragments of conversations at various clusters. A breeze lifted my dress, a reminder that even while everything here had been meticulously arranged, some things are beyond anyone's control. I stopped when I heard Sophia's voice from the far side of the hall. It carried clearly, enough to draw the small group's attention. We've converted the family clinic to a private model. I now coordinate our collaborations with outside research groups, especially the post-op complication monitoring system, integrating Stanford methodologies and domestic experts, she said. I didn't interrupt. I stood at a distance, simply observing. Sophia's gown was hand-embroidered, cinched at the waist with sheer, jewel-adorned shoulders. Her makeup was precise, wine-red lips, smoky eyes. From the outside she looked the perfect bride. But her eyes kept darting around. Glass in hand, she did not drink. Her arm held tense as if to steady a person on the verge of toppling. An elderly man with salt and pepper hair stood beside her and spoke with genuine interest. You're referring to the PMS alert system integrated with a real-time vital signs dashboard? I read the paper presented at the Boston conference. Very impressive. Sophia smiled quickly and nodded. Yes, the core piece is what we're piloting at the clinic. I directly oversee the implementation. Were you the developer? He asked next, raising an eyebrow politely but clearly checking the facts. Sophia hesitated a little. Not entirely. I manage the clinical workflow. The technical work is handled by my team. I thought the development team for that system was from Alaris? Another woman in the group chimed in. Amelia Carter, right? I remember seeing her presentation last year with the in-hospital orchestration diagram using 3 alert levels. The system practically revolutionized post-op intake. Sophia forced a smile. Yes, Alaris is the technology partner. But in practice, my mother and I made direct adjustments to fit our clinic's model, since every facility has its own particularities. I caught Ethan's eye across the room. He had taken Mia back to the table. Our daughter was eating strawberries and scribbling on a napkin. Ethan tilted his head as if asking with his eyes, "Are you okay?" I gave a small nod. "Amelia Carter is here, isn't she?" The older physician's voice rang out again. "I thought I just saw her. Is she the bride's sister?" The question made the group fall silent for a moment. Sophia stiffened, then answered quickly, sharply, "She's a distant relative on my mother's side. A successful person, and very busy." I walked over. Neither hurried nor slow. Just in time to hear the remark. Sophia's eyes met mine for a very brief instant, then looked away. "I happen to be rather free today," I said, my tone light and composed as if speaking at a scientific conference. "Actually, I came to congratulate my sister." The silence lasted less than 3 seconds, but it was enough for every gaze to turn. "I'm Amelia Carter," I added, turning toward the silver-haired physician. "Pleased to meet you. Are you the chief of cardiac surgery at Mayo Clinic?" He laughed heartily. "That would be me. And I've been hoping for an opportunity to work with Alaris. The PMS has helped us reduce nearly 30% of complication cases in the last quarter." I nodded. "Thank you. We improved the alert algorithm to integrate real-time biometric variability. If you'd like, I can arrange a detailed presentation." Sophia stood frozen. She did not interrupt or deny it. But her eyes looked lost within a circle of people who were turning toward me with admiration. "I thought you two worked together?" another guest asked, astonishment plain on his face. I smiled politely. "I haven't worked at the family clinic for 12 years. But I'm glad to hear they're using my system." A voice spoke up behind me. My father. "Amelia, could you please not turn this into a medical symposium?" he said. I turned. He wore a charcoal suit and a dark blue tie, his face strained as if trying to control the atmosphere with an old, practiced look. My mother stood beside him, hand resting lightly on his arm, her face ashen as if she had stepped out of a nightmare. "I'm only answering when people ask," I said, keeping my voice even. "Or does it bother you that others know who I am?" "This is Sophia's day," he replied. I looked him straight in the eye. "And I didn't take anything that belongs to her." No one spoke further. Only the clink of glasses and the music continued softly in the background. Then Daniel, the groom, approached. He nodded politely in my direction. "Thank you for coming," he said. I'm honored to learn more about Alaris. I should have known earlier." I didn't answer immediately. I looked at him for a long beat, then replied softly, "No one can know everything. But what matters is knowing when to listen." Sophia looked at Daniel. He avoided her gaze. In that moment I felt no triumph and no gloating. Only the fatigue of someone erased from the family portrait, now returned as a color that could not be washed away. And that portrait, however carefully painted, could not hide the crack that was beginning to widen. The atmosphere in the wedding hall grew heavy. The small murmurs that had been like ripples became successive waves rolling through the crowd. I caught fragments of whispers. "Did she get that wrong? I remember that paper was by Carter. Published in an international medical journal last year. Stanford? I've never heard Sophia Brooks' name at any conference." I didn't need to speak. Those doubts found a place in each guest's mind. Daniel, the groom, gripped his drink, eyes fixed on Sophia. Usually composed as an internist, his brow now showed tension. He set the glass down on a nearby table and looked straight at his wife. "You told me you had participated in a research program at Stanford. I searched to verify and found nothing. I assumed it was a namesake. But..." He stopped, inhaled sharply. "Now I'm not sure." Sophia fumbled. Her hand trembled, causing her drink to ripple and a few droplets to stain the edge of her white gown. "Honey, I participated under a special arrangement, not under the official name. That's why you couldn't find my record." Those standing nearby could not hide their surprise. A physician from Philadelphia shook his head and murmured to a colleague, "Stanford doesn't have that kind of special arrangement. It doesn't exist." That comment reached others. The crowd began to exchange looks, voices growing louder. A middle-aged guest, director of research at a large hospital, spoke with gravity. "Excuse me, but I clearly remember the paper on the predictive algorithm for postoperative complications." The lead author was Amelia Carter, not Sophia Brooks. Everyone's eyes turned to me in unison. I kept a polite smile and said nothing. No need to. The truth had revealed itself through the guest's remarks. My mother, Helen, couldn't bear the atmosphere. She stepped forward, voice sharp and cold. "Everyone, don't be fooled. Amelia has always liked to steal credit from others. He did it as a child. She didn't come here to congratulate but to ruin her sister's happy day." She said it loudly, intentionally for the whole room to hear. I felt dozens of pairs of eyes on me, half curious, half wary. I remained silent. Ethan did not. He placed a hand lightly on my back and stepped forward. His voice carried without raising. It had weight, and the crowd quieted. "Mrs. Helen, I don't know what evidence you're relying on to say that. But I can confirm that Amelia Carter presented the post-op alert system at the Boston Medical Conference. I sat in the front row that day and hundreds of colleagues were present. No one can dispute that." He pulled a folded copy of the conference program from his jacket pocket. One he had kept. He held it up for everyone to see. "Here, her name is right here. If needed, I can show the original paper published in the Journal of Clinical Innovation. Sophia has never appeared as an author." Helen froze. She hadn't expected Ethan to be prepared. Daniel took the paper from Ethan, scanned it, then turned to Sophia. His voice was low but full of suspicion. "Sophia, explain." Sophia opened her mouth, but words stuck in her throat. Her eyes darted, searching for an escape. Finally she murmured, almost pleading, "I just wanted our parents to be proud. I didn't think anyone would check." A ripple of commotion rose. Guests exchanged looks. Some shook their heads in disappointment. Helen quickly intervened, gripping her daughter's hand. "Enough. This is a wedding, not a courtroom. Everyone can make a mistake." She only embellished the story a bit to please her husband. I could not hold back. My voice rose clear, steady. "A forged degree is not a mistake. Stealing credit for a scientific work is not embellishment. That's deception." Silence fell. I continued slowly. 12 years ago you drove me out of the house and accused me of theft. You chose to believe that story because it benefited Sophia. Now you're constructing another story to cover for her. How much will satisfy you?" Helen's hands trembled, but she kept the high tone. "Amelia, you're petty. Your sister is the bride, and you're trying to ruin her before her husband and guests." Ethan turned to her, his gaze cold. "No one here is ruining Sophia. It's the evidence and the truth doing that." Daniel didn't take his eyes off Sophia. He murmured, but enough for many to hear, "How long have you lied to me?" Sophia burst into tears, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I just wanted to be recognized. I never expected it would turn out like this." I watched the scene without pleasure. I saw the rawness of truth stripped from a carefully crafted facade. The rupture was theirs alone to bear. Guests near me drifted away, avoiding the uncomfortable swirl. But their looks left a clear message. They had seen the masks come off. Sophia, Helen, and the pristine family image they'd worked to construct had been exposed. I stood still, holding Ethan's hand. I had nothing more to add. It was enough. The music in the reception hall dropped into an awkward silence. The violin still played somewhere, but no one paid attention. All eyes were on Daniel, who had just set his glass down with a tense expression. He turned to Sophia, voice controlled but every word distinct. "I studied at Stanford for 7 years, from undergrad through residency. Your name is not listed in any class roster or research registry. I searched extensively. Tonight I want you to answer in front of everyone. Did you actually study there?" Sophia went pale. Her lips parted and closed. Tears blurred her vision and smeared mascara across her cheekbones. She trembled, looking for her mother's eye. Helen stood a few steps away, head bowed, not daring to step forward. I never attended Stanford," Sophia said as if forced. Her voice broke, loud enough for half the room to hear. "My degree was a forged paper. Mom and Dad said one sheet of paper would make people believe. And they used Amelia's scholarship fund for me." A murmur rose, guests exchanging shocked and indignant looks. Daniel stepped back a half pace as if struck. He faced Richard. Is that true? He asked. Richard clenched his fists. His face reddened, veins visible. He snapped. Enough. This is a wedding, not a court. My daughter was trying to preserve family dignity. Everyone embellishes their resume a bit. An older guest leapt up from his chair. Embellish? I just heard your daughter confess to forging a degree. That's illegal, not embellishment. Sophia sobbed, clutching Daniel's arm, but he pushed away. He looked at his wife with profound disappointment, voice low. Not only the degree. You claimed clinical research. I've verified that those studies are Amelia's work. How long were you going to deceive me? Sophia cried out, her voice shattering like glass. I had no choice. The clinic was in debt. Father said to save the practice we had to bill insurance fraudulently. I only followed orders. If I didn't, everything would collapse. Those words were like a match thrown into a smoke-filled room. The crowd erupted in whispers. Many people pulled out phones and began recording, cameras pointing at Richard and Helen. Richard shouted, his voice breaking, "Stop filming. No one is to record this. Put your phones away." But his words no longer carried authority. Several guests had already started recording audio, while others stepped back to avoid being drawn into the mess. Helen stepped forward, trying to pull her daughter toward her. Sophia, you don't need to say anything more. People here won't understand. Just be quiet so we can deal with this later. I walked up, looking her straight in the eye. It's not that they don't understand. It's that you don't want the truth exposed. The clinic has been committing healthcare insurance fraud for years, and now your daughter is revealing it right in the middle of a wedding. Richard turned to me, furious. Amelia, shut up. All of this is because you came back trying to destroy our daughter's happy day. Ethan stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder to stop me from taking another step. His voice was calm but cold. A happy day cannot be built on lies. Your family brought this on themselves, not Amelia. And tonight dozens of people have recorded it. You can't deny it. Daniel put a hand to his forehead, his face torn. He looked from Amelia, me, back to Sophia. I believed you, Sophia. I believed everything you told me about school and your work. But now I only see gaps filled with falsehoods. Sophia collapsed into a chair, covering her face with both hands. Her white wedding gown was now wrinkled and stained with tear-mixed mascara. Guests whispered more. Some left their tables, clearly unwilling to be involved in a scandal that might make the morning headlines. Helen forced a smile, her voice shaking. Please don't misunderstand. It's all a joke, a small family misunderstanding. She was stressed and said foolish things. We're still a respectable family that serves the community. A middle-aged physician cut in, his tone serious. No, Mrs. Helen. This is no longer a family matter. Healthcare insurance fraud is a serious crime. If this is verified, your clinic will face federal investigation. Richard's face went pale. He rushed forward and grabbed Sophia's arm as if to gag her. Stop talking. Let's go. But it was too late. Daniel pulled out his phone. His expression hardened, different from his earlier confusion. I'm her husband. I have the right to know everything. And I will send this recording to the authorities if necessary. Sophia turned to him, panicked. Please don't. I'll lose everything. We'll lose everything. Daniel shook his head, his voice heavy. You married someone I never really knew. The greatest loss is trust. My chest tightened with both pain and weight as I watched. I felt no pleasure in Sophia's collapse, but I could not stop the truth from coming out. It had been hidden for too long. Ethan squeezed my hand lightly as if to say, let this play out. Sophia's wedding, supposed to be full of joy, had become a night of crying, arguing, and the flash of guests' phone cameras. In every stunned look around the room, I realized the family masks they had worn for years had shattered beyond repair. 1 week after that chaotic wedding, I was sitting in my office on the 20th floor of Ours headquarters in Boston when my executive assistant came in. Her face was serious. 2 federal agents are here to see you. They say it's about the Collins Clinic. I set my pen down, a sudden slackening in my chest. I had expected this day to come, but not so soon. 2 men in dark suits, badges clipped to their pockets, introduced themselves as Agents Miller and Sanderson from the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Unit. We need to speak with you privately, Miller began. The Collins Clinic in Vermont is under investigation for Medicare and Medicaid insurance fraud going back more than 15 years. I calmly invited them to sit. Sanderson set a thick file on the desk and looked at me. We have reason to believe the temporary records you worked on at the clinic more than a decade ago may contain important information. Can you confirm when you worked there? I nodded. I worked at the front desk and assisted with charting for nearly a year before my family cut me off. They exchanged a look and Miller said, handwritten notes, shift reports and petty cash receipts you signed could be key. There is evidence that data was later altered to match insurance claims. But original drafts, if they exist, would demonstrate the fraud. I paused. I remembered the brown leather notebook where I meticulously recorded patient details. Admission times, symptoms, medications ordered. I had kept it not for any scheme but to learn. When I left home on that rainy night, I had put it in my suitcase out of habit. It remained in storage in the basement of the New Jersey house I'd rented years ago, and later came with me to Boston. I may still have it, I said evenly. Sanderson leaned forward. If you agree to provide it, we'll have independent evidence to compare with the altered records. I nodded and called my assistant to retrieve the old box of documents. A strange mix of feelings rose. Neither joy nor triumph, but a bittersweet relief. 3 days later I met Sophia again in a small conference room at the federal courthouse in Vermont, where the FBI was holding a preliminary interview. She sat across the table, gaunt, stripped of the bridal swagger. Her wrists were clenched together, eyes downcast. The mascara was gone, leaving dark shadows. Agent Miller asked directly, Sophia Brooks, do you confirm you submitted a forged Stanford credential in the clinic's records? Sophia nodded faintly, her voice hoarse. Yes. I did it at my parents' instruction. They said wealthy patients would trust the clinic more if a Stanford-trained doctor was listed. I was afraid to refuse. Helen, sitting beside her with an attorney, turned pale. She's making this up. She did it for attention. No one forced her. Sophia broke into tears, tears falling on her sleeve. Mother, I didn't want this. Father took me to a lawyer he trusts and had the papers fabricated. Mother herself edited the clinic website to post the credential. I lived in fear of being exposed, but they told me not to worry. No one would check. Silence filled the room. I watched Sophia, and in her eyes I saw a genuine collapse. No confident mask now. Agent Sanderson flipped through documents. What about the insurance fraud? Were you involved in the process? Sophia wiped her tears and tried to steady her voice. Father directed us to bill for hundreds of procedures that were never performed. They submitted claims for minor surgical procedures, for treatments, tests. But patients only came for routine visits. I signed the paperwork under orders, because they said it was the only way to keep the clinic open. Richard slammed his fist on the table and stood up. It's all this stupid girl's fault. I only wanted to save the family practice. Agent Miller replied briskly, Mr. Richard Collins, your statements are recorded. Blaming others won't avoid accountability during this investigation. Helen gripped her husband's hand, whispering, Shut up. I sat quietly observing. I felt no glee and no lingering hatred. Only the plain fact that the truth had finally been exposed after years during which I bore the family's scandal to protect their image. The agent turned to me. Amelia, your notebook has been authenticated. The timestamps match the unusual payments. It will be central evidence in the case. I nodded slightly. I only kept it to learn. I never expected. It was that attention to detail that will help many people, Sanderson said, his voice softening for the first time. Without the notebook, the truth might have been buried. Sophia looked up at me, eyes swollen. In that look there was no rivalry, only desperation and a plea for forgiveness. Amelia. I'm sorry, she said, choking. I took so much from you. And then I was turned into a puppet by our parents. I have nothing left. I breathed in and held my composure. The only thing you can do now is tell the whole truth. Not for me, not for our parents, but for yourself. Sophia dropped her head onto the table, sobbing silently. Her lawyer sat back and exhaled. In that room, masks were removed layer by layer. No one could hide. I, the one who had been forced out on a rainy night, had become a key witness to unravel a web of deception that had lasted decades. The day I entered the federal courtroom in Vermont, White light from the high ceiling made everything stark, leaving no corner to hide. A long wooden bench, microphones neatly arranged. 3 judges faced me, prosecutors and defense attorneys on either side. The air felt thick, but I sat straight, looking ahead, hands folded on the table. The prosecutor asked me to speak. Miss Amelia Carter, do you swear to tell the truth before giving your testimony? I nodded. I will tell only the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. I recounted in detail my time at the Collins Clinic, from manual charting to noticing payments that didn't match care delivered. I presented the brown leather notebook with inked pages, some smudged from the rain the night I left home. I did not expect this notebook to have legal value, I said calmly. But it is the original against which the altered records were compared. I did not embellish anything, nor did I intend to defame. I kept it to learn. The room went silent. The prosecutors exchanged looks and nodded. One judge said in a measured voice, "This evidence will be admitted." Helen turned to Richard, her face drained of color. Richard bowed his head, gripping the edge of the bench white-knuckled. Sophia sat apart, tear-streaked, unable to look up. I felt no triumph. Only the sense that a final circle had closed. After the hearing, I walked down the marble corridor where Daniel waited. He no longer looked as strained as on the wedding night, but fatigue marked his features. "Amelia," he said, his voice raw. "I want to apologize. I believed everything Sophia said. I didn't look closely or question it, and that blinded me. I have filed for divorce." I looked at him. His eyes lacked their usual pride. They held only honesty. "I don't need your apology for myself," I said slowly. "What matters is that you forgive yourself. You were also a victim of lies." Daniel nodded, then pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I want to work with Alaris Health Tech. I can contribute my clinical expertise and my national network. I don't want to stand on the sidelines." I took the folder and flipped through a few pages. It contained proposals to deploy Alaris at major cardiac centers, with data from studies Daniel had led. "We will consider it," I said. Not because of personal ties, but because of the work's value. Daniel gave a small, weary smile. "I just want to work where truth matters. That's something the Collins family never showed me." 1 month later, Alaris signed a contract worth 9 figures with the national hospital chain United Health Network. The signing ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., attended by the media, health leaders, and federal officials. I stood at the podium with the Alaris logo on a large LED screen behind me. "We don't just provide technology," I said firmly. "We bring a commitment. Every patient, from big cities to small towns, deserves safe, transparent care. No fraud. No fabricated numbers. Only truth and results." The room erupted in sustained applause. Ethan sat in the front row, his expression proud. Mia sat beside him, clutching a small flag printed with the Alaris logo, waving it enthusiastically. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed and asked about the Collins investigation. I replied briefly, "The court will decide." I did not come here to talk about the past. I came to demonstrate Alaris' present. My standing was no longer confined to the medical sector. Major newspapers called me the woman who turned being cast out into the foundation for building a health tech empire. I did not seek the praise. I only felt relief that years of effort had not been erased. More importantly, no one could use my past to hold me back again. Late one evening, when the office was quiet, I stood alone in the glass conference room looking out over the DC streets, the amber lights stretching like a river. Ethan came in and put his hand on my shoulder. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "And now the world is watching." I turned and smiled. "You and Mia are my world." He squeezed my hand. We stood there in silence as the traffic flowed on. There is no room in my heart for hatred anymore. Only a calm that comes from the truth finally being acknowledged, and the realization that power does not rest in lies but in the hands of those who dare to live honestly. The sentence was handed down on an autumn morning at the federal courthouse in Vermont. I didn't sit inside the courtroom. I watched the live broadcast with Ethan in the Alaris office. The judge read each line slowly, like a blade cutting the ties that had bound the Collins family for years. Richard was sentenced to 12 years in prison for healthcare insurance fraud and falsifying records. Helen received an 8-year sentence, plus a permanent ban from managing any healthcare facility. All the reputation they had built around that small Vermont clinic collapsed in an instant. Local papers called them the fallen medical couple, and former patients spoke out in outrage for having been exploited for years. Sophia's fate was different. The court found she was complicit, but because she confessed truthfully and cooperated with the FBI, her sentence was reduced. She was permanently barred from practicing medicine, though she was allowed to enroll in vocational training programs. For the first time, I saw her face without makeup or pretense. A young woman with shadowed eyes, standing silently to hear the verdict. No one reached out to comfort her. No lights shone on her. I felt no glee. Those sentences were not vengeance for me. They were justice for the community. One late winter afternoon, Ethan and I announced the launch of a new scholarship fund, the Harper First Generation Fund. I chose the name Harper, the family name of my grandmother, the quiet woman who used to slip me a few dollars when I was at community college. She once said, "Some kids have to do everything on their own and they need a hand held out, not to be pulled up but to know they're not alone." The scholarship supports first-generation medical and health tech students who receive no parental support. When I stepped onto the stage to make the announcement and looked out at the hundreds of students seated below me, hungry for opportunity, I saw my 20-year-old self. The girl in a worn coat, suitcase soaked from the rain, still believing in a different tomorrow. A reporter asked, "Why did you call it first generation?" I answered, "Because I want to honor those who start from zero. Like a seed not planted in rich soil, it can still take root and bloom if it finds light." 2 years later, at a major medical conference in Chicago, I walked through the exhibition hall. Amid the booths showcasing shiny new technology, I spotted a group of students gathered around a laptop. They wore simple polo shirts and badges that read, "Medical Coding Certification Program." Among them I saw Sophia. He did not recognize me at first. Her hair was cut short and dyed a light brown. Her face looked thinner but her eyes were clearer, less strained than before. She was patiently showing a trainee how to classify ICD-10 codes, her voice calm and professional. When she looked up, our eyes met. There was no thunderstrike, no drama. Just a quiet pause. Sophia hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. I nodded back. No words were exchanged. No hatred. Nothing left to compete over. Between us it was a full stop. I walked away feeling as if a burden had been set down. Some relationships don't need to be clung to and some cannot be mended. They can simply be allowed to close in peace. That spring, our backyard in Boston began to warm. Ethan dug, while our little daughter Mia and I carefully placed seeds into small holes. She eagerly used her tiny hands to cover the soil and cheered when the rows looked neat and even. "Mom, will this plant grow?" Mia asked, her eyes wide. I smiled and smoothed her hair. "Yes, if you take care of it with water and sunlight. Like all good things in life, you need patience to see the flowers." Ethan stepped close, putting his arm around me, his gaze gentle. "A real garden," he said. "Not like the old ground you were forced off. Here things can grow freely." I looked over the newly planted rows and thought about the long road I had traveled. From a child driven away to a woman who built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and then founded a scholarship for the next generation. It all began on that rainy night when I was 20, stepping out of my family's doorway under the curse, "You will always be a failure." But now, in my own small garden, I understand. Some seeds only sprout when they're removed from toxic soil. When nurtured with truth, love, and faith, they grow strong, unstoppable. My story ends here, but its echo will linger in many hearts. Perhaps we have all witnessed family fractures, wounds inflicted by those closest to us. I chose to walk away and replant my life in a different place, and I believe that sometimes it is the only path to reclaim peace. What would you do? If you were me, would you confront, forgive, or leave quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments. I believe every story has value and deserves to be heard. And if you want to continue this journey, hearing more stories about family, dramatic yet deeply humane, don't forget to follow the channel. Many journeys await that will invite us to reflect on kinship, trust, and how each of us finds our own happiness.